Good morning, everybody. I'm Captain Tommy Scoville, and you are on the lifeboat. And my cat has eaten yet another pair of earbuds, which is just lovely. Really makes me happy. I'm not going to lie to you. She's the number of earbuds that this cat has destroyed is absolutely phenomenal. It really is. She just tears through them. So we've done this. We've done this topic. I don't know, a couple of dozen times at least on the boat, and it's a huge one, right? And it's also a word that has changed its meaning, or certainly has become used a hell of a lot more than it used to be, which is probably a good thing. But triggers, something that comes up a lot in recovery. I remember being in a residential drug treatment program while incarcerated. I was in prison. And the guy that ran the program said that he wanted us to make a list of all of the things that we could think of that would make us want to use our drug of choice. And I remember writing for hours and hours because it hit me that I had never really done anything in my life without being on dope. So if I was making a list of things that made me think about getting high, well, everything made me think about getting high. And I hear that from a lot of people when they first get here or first start trying to quit their drug of choice. It's a little overwhelming. And you feel like every single thing is a trigger. And you know what? There's probably a lot of truth to it, right? It's not in your head. At this point, probably everything is a trigger. It's one of the reasons that the great cliches, right? You've got to change people, places, and things. If you're going to hang out in the same places around the same people, I promise you're going to get high, or you're going to get drunk, or whatever your poison was, because that's just how it works, man. It doesn't work any other way. If you've got 3 people who are using and one person who is not, that one person is not going to lift up the other 3. The other 3 are going to drag that person down. And sadly, that's just the way that it works. But it is important to get a handle on your triggers. Sorry. If you're just starting out on this journey and you feel like every single thing on planet Earth is a trigger to you, as I said, I absolutely understand where you're coming from. But start thinking about the things that really the most dangerous thoughts, or the most dangerous places, or the most dangerous whatever triggers. For me, believe it or not, when I started going through this and started working, really peeling the onion, one of the biggest triggers and one of the most dangerous triggers for me in the world is an album, right? I mean, a song comes on the radio, I'm good. But if you put that album on and started from the beginning, I'm in deep trouble. Like, that is really something that will throw me completely off my game. It's Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. Because for about, I don't know, a decade and a half, 2 decades of my life, every single morning that I got up, I put that on and I started my day with, the first shot until veins no longer worked. And then it was the first smoke or the first whatever. But I programmed my brain so that when it hears the first notes of that album, it's expecting to be fed, and soon, right? It is absolutely expecting me to put something in it, and quickly. It causes a bunch of problems in my dome, right? That kind of triggering really does, and people tend to act as if you're triggered, you're automatically at the dope man's house, right? Like, if by some chance I put on Appetite for Destruction and I get to the 3rd track, by the time I hit the 4th one, I will be either stealing something to have enough money to go buy a bag of dope, or I will just be calling up a drug dealer. It's not what that means. Very often what it means is it's going to start the process of relapse. And we've done a million shows on this, and we'll probably do a million more. But relapse is a process, right? Just like addiction is a process. even if your substance of choice was something you were physically dependent on, you didn't start out day one and you were instantly hooked. You sort of went through this process where in the beginning you're kind of social, right? You make new group of friends, you hang out, it's fun, there's a lot of giggling, then you start buying the stuff and you just keep working up until the next thing you know, you're here. Right. Well, the same thing happens when we're going in the opposite direction. When things are good in life, right? It's easy to let something trigger you. And you say to yourself, you know what? I'm cool. I got through the day. I didn't get high, right? So nothing to worry about from that trigger. We're good. Yeah. Well, that's not always the case, right? Sometimes, excuse me, sometimes what that's going to do is start the ball rolling, especially if you don't communicate it, especially if you don't journal it, right? We get these things that trigger us during the day. And very often, because of what we do for work or where we're at, we don't take the time to get away from the situation we're in and really try to process what just happened and why it made you want to get high or make you want to use or whatever the case may be, right? Since we don't have that luxury and we're probably not going to be able to pull that off at work, we carry it with us, right? Then you get home, you cook, you eat something, and by the time you're getting ready to go to bed, you're like, you know what? I'm beat. It's been a ridiculous day. This day sucked. I'm not going to journal tonight, but I'll do it in the morning. And you're going to have something inside you that is unresolved that I promise is going to wreak havoc. That's just how it works. It doesn't take these massive, huge things where all of a sudden you're cruising down sobriety highway, life is good, and then boom, you've got a needle in your arm. Not usually how it works. If you're new to the lifeboat, you may not have heard this story, but not the last time that I got out of prison, because that would be this time, but the previous time that I got released from prison, I got out and was doing fantastic. I really was. I was doing everything right, and we had been traveling around the country. We had been having a good time, tons of laughs. Everything was just about perfect, and what I was doing for work required that I wear a tie a lot. So I said to the woman that I was married to at the time, I'm going to go out and shop for some shirts, and I'm going to hit Savers, which is just like this thrift store, right? And she got a kick out of that. She's like, you think you're going to find the shirts you're looking for at Savers? I said, you never know what's there. Sometimes there's just, people donate the stuff and you can get it really, really cheap. And she mocked me. But honestly, it had nothing to do with trying to get a shirt. It had to do with my brain trying to get my vehicle as close to the hood where I bought my dope as I could get without it really triggering me, right? This was that insidious walk back. But I promise you, it was that day, right? That day I relapsed, the start of it. Now, it took, I don't know, about a month before I actually used. See, that first day I went there, I just looked at shirts, and then I headed home, right? Proud of myself, slapping myself on the back. No, they didn't have any shirts. A couple of weeks later, I went back to look again, right? And again, I'm a half a mile from the hood. But this time I said to myself, I got a friend that lives over there. I'm never going to go see him again because I'm a drug addict or what? So now we can't be friends. I get sober. I got to treat him like crap for the rest of my life. And these stupid automatic thoughts just start running all over my brain with the intent to ensure that I end up at this guy's house. Why? Because there's heroin at this house. So I drive over there and I got bankroll. You know what I mean? I got a fat wad of cash in my pocket because I don't do drugs. I'm not doing anything wrong. I got a job, right? I was driving a nice car. But I had a conversation with my friend. He's an old Vietnam vet. And he said, yeah, I got a guy on his way right now. Why, you want some? I said, no, hell no, man. I just got out of the joint, dude. I'm doing good. I have no desire at all. But I cracked off a bill and gave it to him and said, but get yourself a little more, man. I remember what it was like to be an addict, right? A little more is awesome. A little more is always good, right? Because you're always worried about the next one as soon as you start doing the one you got. But I left that day. I didn't do any dope. patted myself on the back. And now I had proven beyond a reasonable doubt that I could walk right into the lion's den, right? I could be right there when the drug dealers are showing up and spitting balloons out of their mouth and cash is getting exchanged, spoons are busting out. I was good to go. No problem, man. I got this conquered somehow while in prison, doing nothing to work on my addiction or who I was. Nothing, right? In fact, on that sentence, all I did was a little bit of drugs and played a lot of poker, you know. Also worked out a little bit, but nothing productive. But obviously I had figured this out because now I'm over there and I'm right there. He's literally breaking the stuff up on the table in front of me. Pat myself on the back. I head on home, right? And a crazy thing happened. The person that I was married to brought home a different drug, one that she was a fan of. And she said, I didn't get a lot of this, but someone at work had it. I'm just going to do a little. Do you want some? And that's not at all what I heard, right? Which is really kind of funny if you think about it. But my brain heard, dude, you can do heroin, right? You just got permission to go do it. Get in your car, head over by Sabres, go right by Sabres, go see your boy, hand him about $500 or $600, and let's light this thing up. That's what I heard. And I could sit here and say that, you know what? If she hadn't brought that blah, 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 right? If I hadn't been in relapse for a month at that point, you know, maybe I would have said to her, what the hell are you doing bringing something into the house? Seriously, what are you, stupid? You know who I am? Why in God's name would you bring something? And if you got to do that, why wouldn't you hide it from me? Right? Get an idea of who I am. This was a person who had represented me, you know, as in a lawyer represented me. You think they'd have a pretty good idea that maybe I'm not a guy you want to have any dope around of any kind. But it gave me permission. But that whole backslide probably took 60 days, right? It's a process. And it's one that sneaks up on you. So if you don't do the silly things that we talk about every day here, right? Like make a list of the triggers in your life, places, people, things, songs, whatever, that always are going to rock you off your stance a little bit, right? Where maybe you're not heading in the right direction. Maybe it starts, you know, if your forward momentum stops, let me rephrase that. If my forward momentum stops, I'm in deep trouble, right? For real. In sobriety, for me, I'm moving forward or I'm going backwards. There's no coasting and there's no sitting there with an emergency brake on or any of that trash. I'm either going really fast in one direction or I'm heading really fast in the other. So for me, it's not a choice thing. And you got to have a canary in the coal mine. You got to have something that's going to tell you along the way that, you know what, you're screwing up. And it's got to tell you that before it's starting to approach that it's too late mark. You're going to go through an emotional, a mental and an emotional relapse before you get to the physical relapse, which is where you show up at the liquor store, at a dope man's house, or you make the call or whatever. And that process can take years for some people. It can also happen pretty quick. I mean, but it's a process. So for me, the canary in the coal mine is always my journals, right? If I'm writing something in my journal and I realize that, you know, let's say it's right before I go to bed, and I think to myself, you know what? I wrote about this morning and I wrote about it last night. So this is the third time I'm writing about this in my journal. Obviously, this is taking up space in my head for a reason. It's something that I need to maybe journal a little more about. And if that doesn't get it done, maybe I need to talk to my counselor or whatever. But see, if we just let those things bounce around the inside of our dome, you know, like a pinball machine, well, then you're screwed, right? You're not going to be able to see whether or not you're sliding in the wrong direction. Sometimes it's obvious. I mean, sometimes you know, like all of a sudden you're hanging out with guys that you know are doing dope and you're talking yourself into that because I don't have to be a jerk. You know what I mean? Just because I got sober doesn't mean I can't have friends. We were a lot more than just drug buddies. Yeah, put that to the test. Seriously. I've known a lot of people in my life, and of all of the people that I've done drugs with, there's really only one who's still in my life at any level. One. That's because with every other person, truthfully, the only thing that we had in common, was drugs and the fact that we needed it or we were going to get sick. So back to that jail. When I started to make that list, breakfast triggered me, right? And I think that I started the assignment probably with the best of intentions. And then about 4 or 5 minutes into it, the wise guy in me came out. And I started just, I don't know. I guess I wanted to make this dude look stupid. Like you got no idea what it's like to be addicted to something like this, right? That every single thing on this earth is a trigger for you. And this was a recurring theme for me over a long period of time. If I was in rehab or if I was working with counselors or if I was doing whatever, I would dip my toe in, right? But I never jumped in. Jumping in is getting up in the morning, making your bed, journaling before you go to bed, journaling as soon as you get up in the morning, getting some exercise, walking for maybe a half hour a day or whatever, 20 minutes a day. But doing the things that made everybody else who ever tried to get off dope successful. Just a thought, right? These are not concepts that I came up with, peeps. I promise you. These are concepts that people a lot smarter than me came up with, and they work beautifully. But they really work the best when you don't try to pick the ones that you're going to do and the ones that you're not going to do. You feel me? If you do all of them, if you really try to take this and maybe make sobriety more important to you than, say, a fishing trip or something along those lines, then you might start taking this crap seriously, right? And identifying your triggers is probably going to be one of the more important things that you're going to do if you're going to plan for sobriety. And look, most people don't. We talk about this all the time. Most people will spend way more time planning a 2-day vacation, what they're going to pack, for a 2-day vacation than they will how they're going to live the rest of their life sober. But if you can identify triggers, recognize that people, places, situations, and or cravings or risky behaviors related to addiction. For me, writing things down makes it real. This is a concept that if you had told me about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I might have thought you were an idiot. But writing something down makes it real. When things are in your head, they're thoughts. They're nothing, truthfully. One of the biggest turning points of my life was when I started to put pen to paper every single day. Again, right? If Tommy Scoville came up with this idea, still would be a decent idea, but I didn't come up with this idea. Every successful person on earth does this. Holy hell, right? Should we not mimic ourselves after people who seem to have their you-know-what together if we're trying to get our you-know-what together? I've been trying to get my stuff together for a very, very long time. I think most of us here have. Maybe take this thing seriously. I'm super impressed with the amount of people who are stepping up to the plate and helping one another. The number of calls that have come into Lifeboat Central has dramatically decreased. They're not done, but it is definitely slowing down and slowing down fast, and that's it's making life a little bit healthier for me. I got to get a little bit more sleep, things like that. But I'm doing that. And I'm doing it because it's also a huge part of my sobriety. And it's a part that I've been neglecting. And if you're neglecting part of your sobriety plan, do you know what that means? Seriously? Yeah. It means you're in freaking relapse. It means you're going in the wrong direction. And I've part of that whole table that kind of keeps me up. One of them is health. Sleep, things like that. And I have not really been taking care of business in that part of my life. Now, trust and believe I'm putting that first these days. This is the absolute truth. And I'm working out again. And I'll tell you something really funny too. I got an opportunity to drag my brother, the very old Johnny Scoville, out to work out. And he put him through a prison workout yesterday. It's going to be pretty funny to see Johnny walking around today, and tomorrow will probably be worse. But exercise is another thing that I just stopped doing. Right? All of the things that made me successful when I was in the process of wanting to be this new person, right? More importantly, not wanting to be the cat that I had been for 46 years, right? But I had a really airtight routine. Never varied in any way. Did the same thing every single day, day in, day out. You can't do that in the real world, right? Because there's things that we have to do. In prison, the what you do every single day is the exact same thing. It's Groundhog's Day, right? So you absolutely can design a day where you're busy from the time you open your eyes until the time you put your head on the pillow. And if you're trying to stay sober, that's a hell of a way to make sure you do that. And I did. I absolutely did. Then you get out here in the real world, and it's just different. There's so many different distractions that you don't have in prison. And then there's this whole lifeboat thing, which is a huge gift. This is the best thing that ever happened to my sobriety, to be sure. I'm accountable to a very large group of people. But my health, sleeping, working out, right? Some of the things that really, really have been important in me staying sober for 8 years, I have been neglecting to beat hell. And it's not going to be happening anymore. So I thought I would share that with you because we talk about relapse all the time and how it's a process and how in theory you should be able to catch yourself. And honestly, people, I caught myself 4 months ago, right? I can go back in the journal and I can read where I said, you know what? This is bad. This is bad. But I didn't do anything about it. And that had to do a lot with boundaries and with me saying no and trying to put the needs of me before the needs of the group or of other people. And I don't think it's noble. I think before you say, well, he's such a good guy. I think it's one of those things that you get addicted to, right? And I don't mean the YouTube aspect of it, but I mean the helping people aspect of it. Working with somebody that is trying to get sober is heady stuff. Like if that person actually puts down their drug of choice, 60 to 90 days down the road, that person is still sober. That'll give you a buzz better than the plunger hitting the bottom of a syringe. I promise. It will. The only trouble is, like every other freaking drug, it's got some wicked side effects and some wicked drawbacks, right? For real. And this is something that I've had to come to grips with here recently, is that there needs to be balance in life, in everything, right? And that means that there needs to be balance in the boat. And it's not gonna be a bad thing. If anything, I think it's gonna be a better thing. And I say that because if I'm not completely worn out, right? If I'm not running on empty 90% of the time, believe it or not, I used to do this for a living, right? This talking stuff. This is what I used to do for how I supported my family. But I tend to run on empty. And when I'm doing that, if you know me well, there are probably times that you talk to me, 9 minutes before I was going live where I said, oh, I probably should have had a topic by this point. That's not good. And it's another sign of, well, some of that is just also that you get very comfortable doing the same thing again and again and again. And you feel like, is there anything we haven't covered? Truthfully, it doesn't matter. And this is something else that I've had to come to grips with. This is rote learning. Right? It's really what it is. It's rote learning. Um, I had a coach, and every single day for the entire time this guy worked with me, and he worked with me for years. On He was a swim coach on the whole butterfly thing, right? On how the procedure took place, how your hands came out of the water. But he did it until it was so ingrained in you that not only did you not have to think about it, but if you got out of sync, even a little bit, alarm bells started going off in your head. It was honestly kind of a bizarre thing, but uh, the brain is capable of a lot, right? Truthfully, the problem is that we're not doing a whole lot in many cases to challenge it. And for a lot of us, you wake up and you go, "I'm how old, and what have I done with the last X number of years?" Jam on the brakes now. So you're not asking yourself that question in 6 months. All right, triggers. Sorry. Create a support system. Build a network of friends and family and people who understand what it is that you're trying to do. And this is huge. We talk about this so many times that it seems almost pointless to repeat it. But what it comes down to is, if you've ever tried to explain your addiction to somebody who has not been addicted and or spent a lot of time studying this, right? There are people who have been around addiction enough to really have an appreciation for what somebody going through withdrawal sicknesses or whatever, because they work in that field. Granted, they may not have felt it, but they sure as hell have watched it, and that's and that's really something. But having a support group of people that you do not have to spend any time trying to explain the unexplainable. So I went to prison. I got out of prison. I started getting high again. That is when the normie goes, "Why in hell would you do that?" Right? You had it beat. Why would you have started it up again? Well, there's no way to explain that to somebody. I started it up again because I was a drug addict and I didn't know any other way to live. But that's not going to make sense to they may love you to death, right? But they may not be the best person in your support group. Often the people that love us the most are probably the people that should be maybe the furthest away from your support group. Part of this process is suffering, and it's essential. You're not going to get better without it. And sometimes it's really hard to watch people that you love suffer. And because of that, maybe you just don't push as hard as you should have, right? Or as hard as you could. It's when you put together a support group for you, take it seriously, right? Don't randomly start just grabbing a couple of names and a couple of numbers. I would talk with somebody and be really open about it. Hey, here's the deal, right? I'm a heroin addict and I've been sober for about 8 years. There are times where all of the sort of tricks that I have in my at my disposal to remain sober, sometimes I exhaust all those and I still want to get high. And at times like that, I need to call somebody. And that's heavy. If that's a responsibility that you don't want, then you should probably tell me that. And I'll respect that. I get it, because that's heavy. However, if you're that guy, I'm going to need you to really be that guy or that gal. I need to know that you're going to pick up the phone. And if you don't, you're going to hit me with a text that says, "I'm walking out of this meeting so I can talk to you," or whatever, needs to be said. And that's why having more than one of them is a great idea. But take that crap seriously, man. Take this seriously. This is your journey through the rest of your time on this planet, whether it's going to suck or whether you're going to be able to build something for yourself. I promise you, drug addiction will steal the joy that you should have been having, and any of the joy that you will have in the future if you continue to do it. That's what drug addiction does. It steals joy, and it destroys families. Boy, sounds like another piece of anyway. Some of you know where I'm going with that. Some of you know. Sorry. Develop coping strategies. Learning healthy coping mechanisms to deal with stress and anxiety. And this is really what we do here every day, right? This is what we talk to people in the comment section about. This is why you all sort of exchange information and talk amongst each other, because we're all looking for as many tricks as we possibly can. Our brain is going to attack us all day long, especially in the beginning, all day long. It wants you to take the easiest path, right? It wants the easiest road. And the easiest road is, for me, is do a bunch of heroin. He'll sit on the couch and the brain will have to do nothing, probably for the rest of my time. Right? Just turn off, turn off, turn off. It's a vicious and an ugly cycle. When you quit that, people think I got it all day long. This nagging voice in my head all day long saying, you got to do dope, you got to do dope, you got to do dope. If that's happening, it's because you allowed that voice to run wild all day long. Plain and simple. You don't nicely ask that voice to leave. You replace that voice. You put a different one in your dome, right? Because those two will not run simultaneously. I promise you. Get a different soundtrack and get it playing in your head, right? That's basically what we're trying to do at all times. Because those cravings, they don't last all day, right? Honestly, they last between 3 to 10 minutes. So if you can get through that 3 to 10 minutes and get on to the next stretch of smooth water, because isn't that really how this works? For any of us that have been sober for any length of time, isn't that it, right? It's smooth sailing until it isn't. And then when it isn't, that's when you need every trick you got in the bag. I'm a big proponent of getting out of Dodge, right? And not caring at all if it looks odd or whatever. You know, that's something I can easily explain to people later. Hey, man, you just walked out right in the middle of that dinner. Yeah, everybody there was making me want to shoot dope. So I left. Who's going to tell you that that was a bad idea, right? But we don't do that. We'll sit there and just listen. And it's something, right? They're saying something that's grinding your gears, maybe about a family member, something from the past, a memory you just don't want to deal with, but they just keep needling. Right? Get up and leave. Get up and leave. And if you're at your house and you're trying to get sober, sitting on a couch in a room with 4 walls for any length of time, and I mean an hour or two, you're in trouble. I promise you. Your brain is going to get really used to the environment. The smells aren't going to change. The sights aren't going to change, right? Maybe the sounds, you know, whatever the next thing on the, you know, on the TV or on YouTube or whatever. But your senses are not becoming bombarded with anything. But the ants are going to start crawling all over your brain. That is when you are at your most vulnerable. I promise. Downtime is god awful. Get up, walk out of that room, go outside into the sun, and everything changes. For real. You're looking at different things, and your brain has to process that, right? Squirrel, whatever. Start walking around. Now you've got muscles moving, right? Instead of just sitting and melting into the couch and staring at 4 walls, now you're looking at all these vibrant colors and a hell of a lot of different sounds, right? Cars, horns, birds, completely different. And when all of those senses have been bombarded, it's a lot more difficult for your brain to go, get high, get high, get high, get high, get high. You know, your brain starts going, damn, it's a much nicer day out here than I thought it was. Let's get through that 3 minutes. The whole point of sobriety and of sobriety groups and of peer groups and all of that is to come up with the little tricks of the trade that are going to keep you sober long enough to maybe talk to somebody that can really help, like a professional who can maybe, you know, work with you, help peel that onion down. You can do it with a journal. I promise you can, people. But boy, if you get with a professional, you can do it a hell of a lot quicker, especially if you happen to trust that professional, which is huge. You know, if you're going to work with somebody, unlike any other doctor, I think that's one that you really want to make sure that you get along fantastic with any psychologist or psychiatrist, because you have to put a substantial amount of trust into that person if you're going to get anything out of those sessions, right? That's kind of a huge thing. I'm no longer addicted to coffee. Can anybody like be wildly impressed by that? I am no longer addicted to coffee. Now, I will say this. I still drink it probably 3 times a week or 4 times a week. And there are days I might drink a crap load of it during the day. But if I take 2 days off or 3 days off, I don't get the headaches or any of that stuff, which I think is amazing. Change your environment if possible. Avoid environments and situations that trigger cravings. Well, what happens if it's where I live? Well, I'll tell you what, if it were me, number one, I'd viciously rearrange. I really would. I would viciously rearrange. I would make sure that room didn't look like it did when I was in there, addicted to dope, sitting and waiting for the guy to pull up with it or whatever. I would change that room. And if it required just moving a couch here, moving a TV there, maybe a coat of paint, different color. I was always, truthfully, a big fan of moving. It never worked. But every time I really had that, this is it. This is the one where I am going to get sober. And I swear to you, like I'm all in. I got on methadone or whatever. It was always, all right, I got to get out of this state. Right. And that's how I moved usually from one state to the next, was when I said, and every single person in this state that I know is either a heroin addict or a heroin dealer. I got to get out of this state. And it's just unbelievable how fast you can do that in the next state. It doesn't, we are who we are. No matter where they drop us, no matter where you plant yourself, you're not going to change. And that's why trying to run away from any of these things just doesn't work. It's a waste of time. Absolutely a waste of time. But on the short term, I'm all about changing your environment. Get out, right? Get out. If you're growing roots, right, to a couch, the odds are stacked against you. I promise you. You understand the concept. This should be wildly simple to understand as a concept. If we give our brain nothing to do, right? If we're just like, take 25 minutes, right? You can break, do whatever, smoke if you got them. Your brain's going to run wild. It's going to run wild. There's no assignment. There's nothing that you're thinking about. Personally, throughout the day, I'm usually thinking about something. I've usually got something going from one thing to the next, even if they're happen to be absolutely ridiculous. Like that thing I did yesterday with that egg. Absolutely ridiculous, juvenile, right? Like that's the kind of crap that I would have been doing with my brother in like the 10th grade. Sadly, I don't know that we've matured a lot since the 10th grade. But nevertheless, no matter what I'm doing, I don't have downtime. I promise you, I don't have downtime. I can't afford it. And I know that. Through trial and error, I know that. And I've watched it do a lot of damage to a lot of other people, man. See if you can't schedule your day so that, especially in the beginning, that you've got something that you're doing at all times. And if you've got some downtime, walk. Right? During that time, don't sit on the couch, go walk, go exercise, go do something that is going to A, benefit you, and B, keep you from staring at 4 walls, because that, people, will drive you insane. Take this from a guy that spent a lot of time staring at 4 walls. It's not particularly healthy. You got to take my word on this one. Stay mindful and plan ahead. Be aware of potential triggers, right? This is the reason that the first thing that we say, hey, make a list of all of those triggers. Why? So that before you get in the car with your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whatever and head off to some place that is going to be the biggest trigger in the entire world for you, maybe the two of you ought to have a conversation about whether or not that's a great idea before you go, right? I went to a funeral in Houston, Texas. This would have been last century, in the 90s. And there was a guy, we'll call him James, right? And I'm not being mean or fat shaming or any such thing, but the entire world, including his mom, called him Fat James. And he was one of the biggest people I have ever seen in my life. And great sense of humor, really, really super funny guy. When he passed from just unbelievable drug abuse, I don't know what drug got him, but he was amazing with the amount of drugs he could put away. Anyway, when he passed away, they had a funeral for him. And I was at the time trying to stay sober. This was actually a period of time where I was working at it. I really was. And what I was struggling with at that time more than anything was cocaine. I was really, that was the drug that was giving me the business at that point in my life. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to a funeral. How dangerous can a funeral be? I mean, granted, I know I was going to see some people there that were, dope dealers or whatever, but the guy's mom's also going to be there. His sisters are going to be there. Like, it's not going to be a keg party. It's still a funeral. There's going to be clergy, whatever. And people walked up to pay their respects at the casket and were putting wads of money inside this guy's coat. Apparently, kind of an Egyptian thing. They thought that he might need 20 or 30 grand to get him to the other side. Not exactly sure what that was all about. But they also started putting drugs into the coffin. And when the last person had viewed it, one of his friends said, if James was here, he would want this to be a celebration. And everybody kind of sort of nodded or whatever. And then he closed the top of the casket and started dumping copious amounts of blow on top of the casket, right? If I had this much on the ball, if I had made a list of triggers prior to that day of my life, that probably would have been something I would have avoided. Yeah, it's a funeral, but every single person going to that funeral does drugs. Probably not a place I should be. Would that have been disrespectful to the dude? Yeah, probably. It probably would have. But I snorted coke every day for about 3 more years after that funeral. So, knowing your triggers and avoiding them, especially in the beginning, the longer that you're in a lot of ways, you get a little bit more solid. You follow me? You also get more vulnerable because you start getting to that phase where you're like, you know what? I have been sober so long, I could probably control it now. That's a reality. But the longer that you're in, the thicker the sobriety skin gets, which is essential. You don't want small things, setting you off. But make a list. Take this stuff seriously, people. It's fun to hang out, for real. And we're liable to eat something really disgusting, in the next week or so, and I'll probably make that terrible sound. And we do some stuff for laughs. But I'm telling you, if you're living your life and you have to have a substance every single day to get by, right? Especially if that substance, you get sick without it. Man, I've been there, right? Spent the majority of the time on this planet that way. I definitely have spent way more of my life on heroin than not on heroin, which is pretty scary, but it's a fact. If I can do this, if I can get off of this garbage, then anybody in the world can do it. I promise you. It does take that moment where you kind of shove all your chips into the center of the table and say, I'm going to do this. Without that, you're spinning your wheels. You're going to get nothing done. Sorry, but it's the truth. If you're going to do this, do it all the way. Journal, get up in the morning, exercise, do all of the things that you need to do in order to be successful. And if one of them you can't do, right? I live in a place where I can't walk. Okay. I did it in a prison cell. I walked back and forth in a prison cell. Back and forth. 12 feet, turn, 12 feet, turn. Sometimes 5 and 6 hours a day. You'd be shocked how far you can walk inside a cell if you got nothing else to do. Right? And everything is walking distance if you've got enough time on your hands. All right, people. We're going to call this one about 15 minutes early. But I may have something else planned for later today. If I do, you can pretty much bet that it's going to be awful and it's going to be my brother's fault. Thank you for getting up early in the morning and spending your morning with me. You know what I mean? Honestly, that's it touches me. It really does. People from all over the world popping in and saying hello, and it's really lets you know that it doesn't matter, who you are, where you're from, what you're into, right? What language you speak. Dope doesn't care at all. It will treat every single one of us like dirt. Equal opportunity. All right, people. We'll see you on the next one. Should be about 5 tonight, I think. And I'm doing an interview tonight at 5. Tonight at 5 o'clock, I am interviewing Spanx Calhoun. These are fun. If you've not seen one, these are fun. And he's on a in my prayers and in my thoughts. Tonight, Spanx Calhoun, 5 o'clock. This will be a fun one, people. This is it's always fun when I can have one of my children on. Gives kind of an odd perspective, right? But yeah, they're some of my favorite shows. So I will see you this evening, 5 o'clock. All right. Be safe, everybody.